Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Jason Mugford with the Langford Conservancy, and I'm joined by Claire Corcoran with Better Brant, and it's our intention to present to you kind of a high-level overview and background to the community planning permit system coming to Brant County, and hopefully get you to raise some questions surrounding the process before it goes through. So that being said, I'll have Claire start us off.
Claire, there's someone in the waiting room, I think, or coming in.
I did just admit someone. They should be in now.
John Lane, are you there, John?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, John, welcome.
Thank you.
Perfect timing. We're just getting started. And if anyone has any questions throughout, you can put them in the chat and we can try and answer them as we go. Without further ado, we'll get started here. Okay, so to begin, we wanted to give a bit of an overview of the province's role in planning and planning systems. First, we have the Planning Act, which was established in 1990. So this is broadly planning's ground rules, what land use controls can be enacted and who can do that. Over the years, it's been updated very actively and regularly, either through provincial staff, through Ontario regulations, or by MPPs through bills. For the middle plan here, this used to be a plan that governed the entire area seen in the map here in tan to coordinate their planning and their planning outcomes. It was established in 2006. The Brant County official plan update in 2023 referenced this plan. Oh, sorry, do we have a question there? Okay, we'll keep going. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe was actually killed off by the province in 2024. The provincial planning statement was a consolidation of all of the province's land use policies. It combined the growth plan, which was the last update in 2020, and the provincial policy statement from 2020 as well, into one more simplified document. So then the main tools the municipality has in alignment with these higher provincial tools is the official plan and the zoning bylaw. The official plan would govern more general land use categories like agriculture, for example. These planning frameworks are typically for 25 years and they must be reviewed every 10 years. So the 2012 official plan came up for its time that it needed to be reviewed, and the council approved their new official plan, the 2023 plan, in May of 2023. Once this happens, it doesn't automatically mean it's enacted. It is then sent to the province. And when the province approves it, then it really comes into full effect. So a year and a bit later, the province approved the new plan and they made 35 edits, which are binding and cannot be appealed. On the right side here, we have some of the province's edits to the official plan that was adopted by Brant County Council. So anything here that is in blue highlight was removed by the province. You'll note that archaeological resources were removed, as well as the technical assessment report requirement for the county to consider in terms of Grand River source protection, which is interesting. Then we have the zoning bylaw, which was enacted in 2017. What this does is it takes those broader land use categories from the official plan, like agriculture, and breaks it down into use types. So for agriculture, we might see use types like on-farm diversified or agriculture-related uses. And then even within that, there are numeric quantities and categories that must be applied to. For example, building heights. So with the official plan being updated in 2023, we see that there is a lot of new development proposals that only comply to half of the tools the province or the municipality has enacted. So they might align with the official plan, but the zoning bylaw has not been updated to reflect the new categories that were created in the 2023 official plan. So this is creating a lot of backlog for developments that are technically already approved in a way through the official plan, but they don't have the numeric quantities that you would find in a zoning bylaw. So there's a lot more kind of uncertainty there. So this is a screenshot from the ministry, from the province, about the main changes to the official plan. You can see them highlighted in purple here. So when the province approved the new official plan, sorry about that, there were new growth and population targets. The revised community structure is where we talk about those new land use categories, and then as well as new land use policies that would apply to all the lands within the County of Brant. This could apply to a lot of things, but the CPPS would also fall under this. So in the 2023 update is when we saw the wording that kind of laid the groundwork to allow this community planning permit system to come into effect. So this is a comparison table showing what the difference is between the existing planning process and the new CPPS process. So here, when an application is significantly different from what the official plan and zoning bylaw regulate, then they need to submit for either a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment. Once this has been confirmed and the use has been justified for that site, then there's the site plan stage. So here, this is often, I don't know of many cases where this goes to council, but this is typically relegated to staff, where they can make a decision on where exactly buildings are put on the property at the site plan stage. So the CPPS process takes these three different options, minor variance, zoning bylaw amendment, and the site plan approval, and combines them into one application process. So rather than what typically happens where the site plan approval comes after the fact, it is now a condition of the complete application. So you need to have it very clearly listed where all of your buildings and other like driveways and things like that may be on your proposed development as part of the approval process, not after. And the way that the minor variance and zoning bylaw amendments are accounted for under this system is through a tiered class system of approvals. So variances are accounted for by class 1, class 2, and class 3, which we see here. So this is just kind of a simplified example. It's not made to reference any zoning or exact bylaw that has been drafted by the county. But if we had a development fall under class 1, it would receive automatic approval. So what we did here was we used the example of stories. So this is a bit different from the Brant County context. You might not have them set so high. But for class 1, say a building would fall under 8 to 10 stories, it would get automatic approval. If there are more variances within that 8 to 10 stories, then it falls under class 2, and staff has the discretion to approve or deny that application. And then if something is seriously out of the assigned ranges, it will go to class 3, which is where you will see the traditional council approval. But all of these, again, are within a more condensed timeline of 45 days. So this is just a bit of history about where the system comes from and how it comes into effect. So the community planning permit system, or the CPPS, is often talked about in conjunction with the CPP By-law. It gets a bit confusing, but basically the bylaw just allows the system to come into legal effect. This is the kind of thing that mocks the zoning bylaw. So we have an example here. This is of Paris, just from the zoning comparison tool. You can see just how much the zoning has changed. There's a lot more zones, and as well as all of these hatched sites, which are site-specific zoning. There's a lot more variance there. As for other municipalities that have implemented this, the system was introduced in 2006 as the development permit system. It was quickly adopted by the township of Lake Bays, and this was only for a specific area as their shorelines. The system was then further reworked and kind of reintroduced in 2017 as the community planning permit system. After this, we see a lot more uptake in municipalities adopting it. I've listed some examples here of other adopters. There's only a few that actually have their CPP bylaws in effect. There are a lot that have drafted or their council has approved, but the province has not approved it yet. So these ones are all fully in effect. The Township of Lake Bays, which was the first one to implement the system, extended it town-wide in 2021, or township-wide, sorry. Similarly, the town of Huntsville adopted a bylaw for their entire town in 2023. Now, Innisfil, they did area specific. They started in 2017 with their shorelines and then added a specific neighborhood in 2025. As for Brant County, we see this process begin in late 2025, which is when staff began undergoing technical reviews and reports. Then this transitioned over to phase 2, which was the end of October into January 2026, which is when the draft bylaw was being developed. Then this was finally opened up to public engagement and consultation, which is when the county started hosting open houses and public surveys. This is when there was a lot of engagement on Engage Brant. Following this phase in the end of March, the draft bylaw was more finalized. There was a bit more engagement again through Engage Brant, and it was supposed to be finalized July 7th, but at that meeting, council voted to defer it because there were a lot of questions coming from developers and community members. So that being said, we'll hand it over to Jason.
Okay, sorry, Claire, before I start, I just got a notification that the meeting might be ending soon. I thought I scheduled it until 8:45, so I don't know why that's the case.
Maybe we could give a link, or if we do lose people, maybe we could just give them the link to come back on again. If you need
Yeah,
to make a new meeting, Jason, or
yeah. Just because there's a few of us, that might be feasible. I just
yeah.
want to let people know it might cut out in about 9 minutes. But I think that's enough time to give my portion. If we do cut out, I'll just resend a link. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So having gone over that background and overview, thank you, Claire. Given the complexity of the CPPS, we found it useful to maybe break it down for potential applicants or onlookers. So there are 3 primary sections, and the first is administration, and it describes the administrative processes that determine how the CPPS is applied and how it's enforced. The second section is the CPPS's framework, and it outlines the fundamental components of the community planning permit system within Brant. And those include development classes, approval authority, public notice, variation, and facilities, services, and matters, which we could talk about later. The most important section that you might find yourself referencing as an applicant would be section 3, which is the zone and development standards. And this outlines land use permissions, use-specific and zone-specific development standards, as well as describing design standards, parking and access requirements, and overlay standards within sensitive areas, such as natural heritage, for instance. Now, the last section is definitions, figures and tables, although those figures and tables aren't included on the current draft release. Right. So the first section, administration. So for each one of these sections, I'm just going to outline kind of why it matters and some possible questions that may come up as you read through it. So the administration section matters because it explains who makes the decisions and how your application would be processed. It identifies pre-consultation, which would have to take place before that 45-day, or sorry, that 45-day turnaround once the application is received from planning staff as a key consideration. It outlines what constitutes a complete application and what you may need to accompany your application, whether that be assessments in the case of overlay standards. And it describes when amendments may occur. So some possible questions you might have within this section are, who decides whether my proposal is approved? What information do I need before submitting an application? When should I meet with county staff? What happens if I want to change an approved permit later? And when is a CPPS bylaw amendment needed? So the next section is the CPS's framework, and it matters because it introduces the development class system, that 1, 2, and 3 class system that Claire introduced earlier. Although it's worth noting, not every zone throughout the county has all 3 classes. Some are only limited to 2 classes. So there may be limitations in the notification. For instance, within agricultural lands, there is no class 3, which implies that there is no option for a council meeting regarding a specific permit, nor would there be any type of mail out for that level of permitting. Oh, sorry, could you go back there? And some possible questions you might have are, which development class would my proposal fall under? Is my proposal eligible for variation? Will nearby residents be notified? And if so, how? Those 3 methods that would either be through the website for class 1, which would require residents to seek out that information. For class 2, it would be on-site signage as well as that website. Sometimes the signs can be quite small and not very noticeable. And for class 3, that would include, I believe it's 240 meters from the property line. Any other surrounding property owners would be notified within that radius. Right. And yeah, can the county approve my application? And if so, maybe with conditions, as well as how does facilities, services, and matters apply to my proposal? Right. So the most important section here, section 3, would be zone and development standards. And it matters because it determines what uses are permitted on your property. It will identify whether use is either appropriate or discretionary. We'll talk about that later as well. And it establishes standards including setbacks, parking, building height, and lot coverage. It also applies the overlay requirements for sensitive areas. Like I said, natural heritage is the most prominent of those examples. And some questions you might find yourself asking are, what zone is my property in, and has it changed from previously? The answer is most likely yes. And for that, you could see the zoning comparison tool, which we could explore later as well. Is my proposal appropriate or discretionary? And what development standards would apply to your property? Does the property intersect with any overlays? And would you need any variation? Right. So this next page, sorry, I think we might have skipped one there. Yeah, so these are kind of to the left of the screen, all the zones that are going to be applied throughout the county. And I believe those first 3, agriculture, countryside, and rural lands, will make up the majority of the area throughout the county as designations. And it's very important to pay attention to the objectives, which are outlined also within the CPPS for each zone. So while something like rural land, countryside, and agriculture, they're very similar, and oftentimes they're very proximate to one another. The objectives will vary throughout those 3 zones. So of course, for agriculture, it will be primarily agriculture related activities, as well as agriculture itself will be the primary use within those zones. Countryside is a bit more permitting. And then beyond that, rural lands could be even further permitting, although these zones could be next to one another. So you might see some conflicting uses if these zones are kind of not buffered. Now we have appropriate versus discretionary. And just because a use is permitted, it doesn't mean that it will automatically be approved, right? So if it's designated as appropriate, it must follow the established criteria. And those are the variations we kind of mentioned earlier. And if it's established as being discretionary, the uses would require additional planning judgment based on the proposal and its context. And at that point, staff would be making those discretionary decisions, right? And of course, we have the development standards themselves and the overlay standards where applicable. So overlay standards only apply to certain zones. And finally, our last section will be definitions. And as I mentioned, figures and tables, which are not currently included in the published draft our draft CPPS. But this section defines important planning terms, which might confuse you throughout the CPPS. There are a lot of new terms and a lot of planning jargon that they kind of have to include, but it's well defined in the definition section, and it explains how measurement standards are interpreted. So some possible questions you might have are, what does this particular standard or term include? And that will be answered in this section, as well as how are setbacks measured and how is building height measured, things of that nature. Right. I know that's a lot of information. Let's see how much time we have here. Okay, just have less than a minute. So we've identified some key things to consider as the CPPS advances to its implementation stage. So the first is county-wide implementation. So a single framework offers consistency, but it must also accommodate very different planning contexts. So Brant's CPPS is very unique in that it's the first county-wide application. The second consideration here is that decisions will, of course, be faster and discretion for staff will be greater. This places greater responsibility on them. So given that development is streamlined, there's a greater need for clearer standards and complete applications, as well as consistent staff decision-making, sorry. The third consideration is public notice and participation. As we've discussed, there will inevitably less of it. So public notice and opportunities to participate will vary depending on the type of application, but generally they're diminished under this new system. The fourth consideration is zone objective differentiation. As I mentioned earlier, distinguishing between similar but different zone objectives will require very careful attention within rural settings in particular. And fifth, we have a long-term planning framework. So the CPPS will shape planning for years to come. As we know, it won't be able to be amended for the first 5 years following its implementation. And finally, understanding the new system. So accessible information and ongoing public education, as we're doing tonight, will be essential for residents, landowners, and applicants alike. Right, that concludes our presentation. I guess at this point, we'll open it up for questions and discussion. And I'll just preface by stating that we are not registered planners, nor are we with the city of Brant, although we've done extensive research into the CPPS. So hopefully we can clarify some questions that you might have had going into this, or some questions that you had throughout. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and listening.